Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get going. I'll let folks in as they come in. If I've seen some of you are just struggling with the technology a little bit, no worries. We are recording this, and we'll make it available the after the presentation is concluded. So give us a few days, and then we'll make that available. Let's see. All right. Well, I'm, oops, multitasking.
Off, right?
So I'm Jennifer Sharp, the TMH Executive Director. I am really excited to have you all join us today to learn more about our history and our beautiful building. Today also kicks off National Women's Month, and I can't think of a more perfect way to start the celebrations. I want to offer a huge thank you to Reagan Oxter, our development specialist, who you see here on screen. She has put this beautiful, gorgeous presentation together and handled the details that bring us all together today. I also want to thank each of you for your support of TMH through ticket purchases and additional donations that provide critical funds to ensure that we can continue to provide a welcoming, affordable, and comfortable home for the hundreds of women who live here annually. Our presenter today is Jim DeLorbe, who is our unofficial historian, neighbor, and friend, and we are grateful for his time and support of TMH. A few housekeeping notes before I turn over the microphone. We will have plenty of time at the end for Q&A, so please hold your questions. You can type your questions into the chat or the Q&A section during the presentation. And once we go into the Q&A, you'll also have an option to raise your hand to ask a question so we can have more of an interactive conversation. Without further ado, I am very pleased to turn this over to Jim DeLorbe. Jim,
Hi,
thank
everyone.
you.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. Thanks to all of you for joining us this afternoon, and special thanks to Reagan, who's put this beautiful backdrop up so you don't have to look at my sorry talking head throughout. And she has some beautiful slides to illustrate what we'll be talking about. So today we're going to do a 40,000-foot look at TMH's history and its singular residence hall it occupies. The information we're sharing today is the result of a comprehensive plan to undertake an in-depth look at TMH's amazing story. A complex story, no doubt, but one that is serving both as an inspiration and a model, enabling TMH to plan and move forward during the critical next few years. Most importantly, we've uncovered a story that has provided the foundation for making TMH's case and rolling out a major bricks and mortar fundraising campaign. So to begin, it's important to clarify up front that we'll be talking about both the Thompson-Markward Memorial Building, which is the site of the residence today, and the Young Women's Christian Home, YWCH, the organization. It's an important distinction to understand as TMH embarks on the renovation of its present residence. So on your screen right now, you're going to see a logo that is found in some of the books and things that we've pulled from the library shelves and we'll be taking a look at later. So let's talk about Thompson-Markward, or the YWCH, sorry. YWCH, the organization, predates TMH, the residence hall, by nearly 50 years. YWCH has reached several salient junctures in its long and storied history at which decisions made and courses taken would determine the future path of the organization. One such juncture is occurring right now. So in order to continue on the right path, TMH has undertaken an in-depth exploration of its history so we fully understand the people, principles, and practices that have enabled the organization to remain vital and relevant for nearly 165 years. So on your screen now, we're going to be taking a look at present-day YWCH, which is known as the Thompson-Markward Memorial. And wow, is that a beautiful, it's just such a beautiful structure. So to continue, as a result of exploring its past, it's become clear that YWCH, TMH, has a much more nuanced history than anyone really understood. YWCH was created and nurtured by many prominent women from across the United States who are pioneers in creating a new vision that enabled young women to establish themselves as individuals who could independently succeed as productive members of society. So we're going to take a look at the founder, Mary Wilkinson, and these portraits were commissioned that you'll be seeing this portrait and others back in 1937 to commemorate the opening of a new wing of the building. The Thompson-Markward story all begins with one visionary woman, our founder, Mary Gause Wilkinson. Born in 1833, the daughter of early Ohio settlers, Mary arrived in Washington, D.C. with her husband and daughters in 1862. That year is considered by historians as perhaps the worst year of the Civil War. The battle at Gettysburg resulted in 51,000 casualties and a significant escalation in hostilities. The upheaval resulted in tens of thousands of desperate, displaced people converging on our nation's capital. That included a considerable number of women who had lost their families, their homes, and were now without a way to support themselves. Single, unattached women, no matter their education, status, or accomplishments, had no means to support themselves or secure housing. Prior to the war, no one conceived of a world where a woman needed to work and be self-supporting. Witnessing this increasingly desperate situation, Mary Wilkinson began what she called the work by opening her home to young women, providing them not only food, clothing, and shelter, but a nurturing home, a place of sanctuary and community in which to rebuild their shattered lives and find new ways to not only survive, but to become once again respected and in the future productive, independent, key on the word independent, members of society. Throughout the war, Mary engaged others in the community to support the work, and so was able to secure increasingly larger properties at various locations on Capitol Hill to provide ever more housing and shelter. As Mary's work and vision expanded, hundreds of young women were able to acclimate to a world transformed by war. Her work began to attract the attention and interest of influential thought leaders from across the United States. This group included such eminent individuals as naturalist Imogene Powell, philanthropist Phoebe Apperson Hearst, and educator and university co-founder Jane Lathrop Stanford. Many other women prominent in academia, the medical and legal professions, and social spheres, recognizing the importance of the work, came on board to support. Now, on your screen, you're going to see three of the early TMA or YWCH supporters. So on the left is Imogene Powell, and she was the spouse and partner of John Wesley Powell, the naturalist and scientist and she went on many, many expeditions at the time. So she was a very unique and singular figure in her era. Phoebe Apperson Hearst was the wife of Senator George Hearst and the mother of William Randolph Hearst. And she was a very active and noted suffragette in the 1890s, well into the early 20th century. And then on the right, you have Jane Lathrop Stanford, the co-founder of Stanford University, and very instrumental in the early days here with this organization. So let's moving on. So by 1876, through the ongoing and targeted efforts of these dedicated women, such as the three that we just saw, and there were many others, it's quite an impressive list, the national significance of the work Mary Wilkinson had begun many years before was finally recognized in that year with the award of a prestigious congressional charter. A charter signed by none other than John Sherman, one of the most powerful political figures of the late 19th century. The charter not only recognized the work, but officially established and legally incorporated a congressionally sanctioned Young Women's Christian Home, YWCH. The work now had a name, a major juncture, no doubt, in setting the organization on a broader national path. So let's take a look at, this is who I think of as the organization's fairy godmother, Elizabeth Bessie Kibbe. Through the generosity of a truly extraordinary woman, Elizabeth Kibbe, who preferred being called Bessie, YWCH finally was able to have a permanent address. Bessie donated her much-beloved childhood home, built by her grandparents. Bessie's was no ordinary home, but a stately townhouse mansion that provided an environment conducive to elevating the status of young women aspiring to better lives. And we'll have an image of the house that we can hold up and you can take a look at during the Q&A. Once established in a permanent home, the leadership of YWCH made perhaps one of the most critical decisions in its history. The board took the unparalleled, to this day, it's still astonishing to me that any organization has ever done this, step of informing the U.S. Congress that it could no longer, in good conscience, accept the substantial annual grant that came with the award of the charter. They decided that they had the leadership in place who would support and sustain the organization, and that they had developed and successfully implemented an operating model that would complement their efforts to be self-sustaining. True to the mission, they believed that the appropriated funds should be used to address other more pressing civic needs. To this day, YWCH proudly continues to operate as an independent, nonprofit organization receiving no federal, state, or local public support. So thanks to its resolute and visionary leadership, YWCH continued to expand its service to young women from across the United States, and in short order acquired and connected an adjacent townhouse, nearly doubling the number of young women who could be accommodated. YWCH's innovative mission, services, and managerial due diligence served as a model for the creation of similar organizations across the United States. So let's talk a little bit more about the various residences here. So prior to its location on Capitol Hill, in the structure now eponymous with the organization, YWCH was located in the heart of downtown Washington, and this is C Street that you're seeing on the screen here. YWCH, as mentioned earlier, had occupied the former Kibbe Mansion and an adjacent property. For nearly 40 years, YWCH had lovingly maintained its prized residence until the day in 1929, when the leadership received a notice from the government of District of Columbia that the property was being seized and condemned by the city to be demolished to make way for a new district municipal center. And talk about a salient juncture. Here we are at the depression is setting in, and you find out that you're losing your property. Adding to this unwelcome news, the city was offering compensation for less than a tenth of the property's market value. Nearly simultaneously, the stock market crashed, and the nation was thrown in an economic crisis the likes of which the country had never seen. Faced with these dual, seemingly insurmountable challenges, YWCH leadership was forced to explore a range of potential future scenarios for the organization. These range from shuttering operations entirely to exploring ways and places to relocate to merging with another organization to just exist. True to form, after careful deliberation, it was decided to remain in operation and secure funds to relocate. And as the operating model called for, special external committees were formed and volunteers recruited to raise both public awareness of the situation and to raise the necessary funds to purchase or construct a new and better residence. Meanwhile, TMH leadership would stay focused on daily operations and finances, ensuring that the young residents were provided with ongoing day-to-day room and board and care in case of medical emergencies or job losses. In no time, the external friends, what was called the Friends Committee, as opposed to calling them like an external fundraising committee, took bold and decisive action. A publicity committee opened a site on Connecticut Avenue to attract media coverage and heighten public awareness of the situation. The patrons, Read Fundraising Committee, went to work and recruited no less than the celebrity figure of the day, George M. Cohan, who you will see on your screen here. who agreed to the opening performance of a new stage play, or his new stage play, The Tavern, being a benefit for YWCH's fundraising campaign. Thanks to First Lady Lou Henry Hoover, who agreed to serve as the event's patroness, the event was a remarkable success. So as you see on the screen here, so George M. Cohan was basically the Taylor Swift of the day, different gender, but everybody in the world knew that man. And if you talked about entertainment value, I can't even conceive of how they got in touch with this guy and convinced him to do what he did to kick off the fundraising campaign. So if anybody knows Taylor Swift, make connections for us. And then, are you right, is First Lady Lou Henry Hoover, and she was very lost in the history of the organization. She was the First Lady at the time. She was very active in the Girl Scouts and other organizations for particularly young women, because she had really been pioneering herself. She went to Stanford University in the 1890s, acquired an advanced degree in sciences and mineralogy, and did such things as co-authoring and interpreting rare Greek translations of metallurgy with her husband at the time, long before she entered the White House. So her role is very different than the way we see her today. She was very much seen as a pioneering woman in support of a new era for women. All right, so the new home. In short order, in spite of the dire economic situation and through diligent negotiation with the city, TMH had secured the funds to not just relocate, but to construct a new state-of-the-art residence on Capitol Hill. After an exhaustive search of over 71 properties, none of which were suitable to the needs, with ongoing support from benefactors, it was determined that the time was right to construct a new state-of-the-art building. Not only would it ensure a home for future generations of young women, it would provide desperately needed jobs in the especially hard-hit construction industry, which was an important factor for the board at that time in actually building rather than just buying an existing structure. From architect to builder to construction worker, a new TMH would provide jobs and income during the worst and most prolonged economic downturns in American history. As construction was underway, a bequest from the estate of longtime friend and benefactor, the late Mrs. Flora Markward Thompson, made it possible to construct an even larger facility than originally designed. As a result, the new structure would be dedicated as the Thompson-Markward Memorial, and you'll see that today carved over. We can see it here in this illustration, in honor of Mrs. Thompson's late mother and husband. In short order, the new structure became eponymous with the organization. Henceforth, YWCA became known as Thompson-Markward Hall. So there we see Mrs. Thompson on the screen, and she's here on the boardroom wall behind us. And again, this portrait was painted back in 1937, along with that of Bessie Kibbe's. So let's talk about sort of the design of the building. The design of the new Thompson-Markward Hall was intended to reflect its origins in 1833, to mark the centennial of its founding, and to be an enduring design expressive of the organization's ageless mission. Working with Washington, D.C. architects Porter and Lockey, TMH leadership commissioned a classically elegant yet restrained Federal Revival-style structure, an enduring style that would provide both a suitably dignified yet comfortable residence for young women to proudly call their home. Constructed by Davis, Wick, and Rosegarden of Washington, D.C., today's Davis Construction in 1932, and enlarged in 1934 through Mrs. Thompson's generosity, the entire structure was dedicated in 1934 by First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, who returned in 1937 to celebrate the anniversary of the charter. So here we're looking at that dedication, and she's cutting a ribbon on a door that leads to what was the infirmary at the time and later became residential rooms. In 1932, the new Thompson-Markward Hall was a state-of-the-art facility. In the winter, its hand-felled coal furnace heated water that was circulated through a system of room radiators. In the hot, humid summers, residents cooled off by opening windows and louvers in hallway doors. Air conditioning was an extravagance of the privileged few. Even the White House was not yet air conditioned. Washing machines were a recent innovation. Drying machines is yet a novelty. TMH's two built-in public telephone booths were considered more than adequate and state-of-the-art for communicating with the outside world. No architect or builder could have imagined the necessity of every person having need of internet access, Wi-Fi, and personal communications devices. And in case of fire, a nearby curbside fire alarm could be activated to notify the fire department. So, needless to say, over the course of the last 90 years, much has changed technologically and the way in people inhabit spaces. Oh, and so on your screen, all right, so the best image that we could find of someone standing at the entrance is clearly from either the late 50s or the early 60s, not the 1930s. If it was 1930, 31, they would have still looked like flappers. Sort of the dresses when the economy plunged, so did the hemline. So we would have had a very different image on the screen. And we're hoping that, kind of reaching out to people, maybe images will start surfacing from long ago that we can use for presentations like this. All right, so now that we've done a broad overview of the history, I'm going to talk about Thompson-Markward Hall and its architectural significance as an important structure in the fabric of the nation's capital. All right. Beautifully designed, solidly constructed, and carefully maintained as it is, after 100 years of continuous use, Thompson-Markward Hall, no need to say, is in need of refurbishment. And with the technological advances of the last 100 years, the structural, mechanical, and electrical systems have to be brought up to date. What has remained constant in the past 100 years is the timeless architecture of the building. This historic landmark is an enduring legacy that today's leadership intends to preserve in order to provide future generations of young women a place to call home. So here we're looking at the facade. And so as I kind of talk about some of the details, it's important that we point them out because each single element represented something at the time. We don't think of architecture in quite the same way, but this building was very purpose designed right down to every last little column in detail to convey something about the organization and the people inside of it. Nestled in the heart of Capitol Hill, Thompson-Markward Hall stands as an iconic structure in the nation's capital. This first of its kind women's residence is not just a building, but a testament to the city's evolving cultural narrative. The hall has housed many women who have contributed to the city's political and social life, making it a living piece of history. Thompson-Markward Hall is a fine and very singular example of what's called federal revival architecture in the nation's capital. As we said earlier, it was designed by the architectural firm Porter & Lockey in 1930-31. And it's the only purpose-built residence hall specially commissioned to provide hotel-like short-term accommodations for young single women. Few such fine commercial examples of this revival style yet exist today in the nation's capital. Perhaps even greater importance is the structure's intentional design that was employed to convey upon its occupants a social status while inculcating an aspirational sense of how to live and comport themselves, and providing an equal footing to launch themselves as individuals into both the social fabric and professional community in our nation's capital. So again, and I think we'll go back to that prior screen. Okay, so here we're looking at the front, what's called the facade of the building. This faces 2nd Street. You can see it's a 4-story structure. Its defining element is the central block there. It's defined by a recessed 2-story stucco walled entry. So that's that area you see surrounding the door with those gigantic columns supporting that plinth that says Thompson-Markward Memorial. It's topped by a distinctive classical pediment, the main door is, and it's articulated with a very massive dental molding. So if you look at the door, you're seeing that it's a broken pediment at the top, which has an urn. The scale of that, what's called the dental molding, that sort of, I don't know how to describe it other than dental molding, is really monumental and very, very impressive. And so that pediment is bookended by stone scrolls, which are a little hard to see in this image, but a very unique architectural detail of the building. So what you have is a step-down flagstone entry court that extends outward from the building to the sidewalk, which, again, that intentional step down, the width of the entry court, and that there's a small planting area. You'll see there's two trees there. They're a little hard to see. They're blooming. There are a couple of dogwood trees there. But that creates a just truly monumental and ceremonial entrance as you proceed up to the doorway. And you'll even notice that the doorways are slightly underscaled, all very intentional. It'll be an interesting challenge in remodeling the building, as Jennifer has found out, but she's come up, not surprisingly, with a really creative solution to that. So from that central block that you see there, there's two long wings, and each of them rests on what's called a brandywine stone base. And that's hard to see because it's behind the shrubs. But again, that was a very luxurious building material and a very unique building material to bring down into the Washington, D.C. area from the Brandywine Valley up in Delaware. Then there's you can see if you go up to the top of the third floor, you'll see a stone belt line that's defining the parts of the structure that the second and third floor look distinct from the first and the fourth. So let's take a look at the back of the building now. So we'll flip around to the back. Now there you'll see a very different look than you saw in the front. And again, it's quite intentional. So let's talk about some of those elements. So the rear elevation contains many unique architectural features that belie the more restrained street facade and project a grander yet more domestic appearance. And you can see that chimney with the Palladian window in the center above those tall holly trees. And, so that again was a very conscious decision to create that Palladian effect on the backside of the building. The rear facade of the main structure is dominated by that four-story section capped with twin chimneys, and they are aligned with the front portico. The chimneys are connected by a brick wall with a full-story centrally positioned, as I mentioned earlier, Palladian window. The central portion of the block is recessed on the first floor. Half of this recessed area is an open arched loggia, which you'll see to the left of those holly trees. This is balanced on the south side by three identically scaled French doors capped by fan lights to mimic the arches. Now, a lot of that is obscured in these photos by the shrubbery, which during the renovation, all of that will be revealed and the garden will be restored to a very different look than you see today. The central section extends and is covered by a second-story projection supported by four ionic columns forming an open-air arch. And again, it's hard to see today because of the holly trees. Above the porch on the second floor is a window-enclosed, what would have been called, and again, it's obscured by the holly trees, a Florida room, basically a sunroom, which I think today serves as a laundry facility. So hopefully that will change after the renovation. And then on the top, the third floor, wrought iron railed open balcony. Oh, that's a great shot from the balcony. So these were, I wish we could see them a little better. And, in person, they're much more evident than what you're able to project on the screen. All of these elements would have been found in luxury hotels of the period, including this garden in the back. So let's talk a little bit about the garden here. The rear garden is really unique on Capitol Hill. People are always astonished that there's this enormous garden that's a private walled space that anybody can access, that anybody would have access to living on the hill. There's a sweep of lawn that slopes outward and slightly upward from the building to a contour defining low stone wall, which again is a little hard to see here, that bisects the garden. There's a graceful stepping stone walkway that leads to a stair and to the upper garden section. The entire area is planted around the perimeter with masses of holly, rhododendron, and azalea shrubs, all under the protective canopy of mature cherry, pear, and holly trees. This charming composition provides a private oasis of calm and tranquility just steps away from the United States Capitol complex, which, trust me, anybody who lives on Capitol Hill is very jealous of that space. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit so we understand the importance of the architects that made the building because they did major pieces of architecture back in the early 30s in Washington, and people would have known the name Porter and Lockey and been quite impressed that they were designing Thompson-Markward Hall. Porter and Lockey was a leading design firm in Washington, D.C., known for their ability to create singular works drawing upon a broad architectural vocabulary. Their design portfolio includes many important residential, commercial, educational, ecclesiastical, and federal buildings in the Mid-Atlantic region. So their work includes, we'll see on the screen here, on the left is the Lutheran Church of the Reformation, which is 2 blocks away on East Capitol Street, which is considered an Art Deco masterpiece designed to dialogue with the similarly styled Folger Shakespeare Library across the street, also done in a Deco style. And you'll see that it was consciously chosen not to do this kind of style for Thompson-Markward Hall because people thought of it as sort of avant-garde and modern and probably didn't think the architectural style would hold up over time, like the one that was chosen for here. Then I'm going to talk about the Art Deco Brownlee Confectionery Building, which is on F Street downtown. That's on the right of your screen. And it has what I'd call Chrysler Building inspired metal cigarettes, were very avant-garde and of the period. And this place was a beloved confectionery store that sold candies and ice cream. So people were really familiar with that building and the architects at the time. Other properties include the Edgar and Veronica Morris Mansion, and this is a Tudor style, and it's the property adjacent to Marjorie Merriweather Post Hillwood, which is very iconic to this day. So Porter and Lockey were very definitely considered sort of society architects here in Washington at the time. And then probably one of the most interesting buildings that they were involved in the construction with is the Scottish Rite Masonic Temple on 16th Street, and that's about 3/4 of a mile up from the White House. That's the only peristyle temple in the Western Hemisphere, and for them to have been involved with John Russell Pope in the construction and design of that building was really a testament to the level of this architecture firm. So over the years, Thompson-Markward Hall has become an iconic Capitol Hill landmark. And its imposing and timeless federal-style facade, located directly across from the Hart Senate Office Building, has become literally and figuratively the interface between the federal city and the local district communities. Now approaching 100 years old, the building's architectural elements are in need of restoration and its structural and mechanical infrastructure in need of modernization. So to wrap this up, and we'll move on to the Q&A, I hope there'll be lots of good questions, and there are no bad questions whatsoever. It's important as we conclude to note that it's important that TMH is at one of these salient junctures in its history. Similar to 1929, a major bricks and mortar campaign is being created that will be announced and rolled out later this year. A campaign that will ensure TMH's iconic residence will be both preserved and updated to meet the changing needs of young women. And as then, TMH will be reaching out at this critical juncture to our network of alumni, friends, and new supporters with opportunities to donate and serve on varied fundraising campaign committees. In this way, we can ensure that our landmark home in the heart of the nation's capital will be here for the next 100 years in service to young women from every state of the Union. So now I think we'd like to open this up to questions about history, about architecture, or anything I think people would like to talk about.
Yeah, so we got a couple of questions. The first question is, has the furniture in the sitting rooms remained the same? And if not, is there anything original still in the home today?
Okay, I'll try to answer that. We may ask Jennifer to jump in there too. To my knowledge, other than, let's see, furniture in the sitting rooms. Okay, so if we're talking about, say, the mezzanine or what I call the living room, the piano room, perhaps the piano, although we don't know. Everybody's done, Jennifer and Reagan, a real deep dive into that piano and did find out that it dates to 1931, 32. So we know it's of the period. but when it arrived and how, I think is a mystery. The furniture in that same room is period design appropriate, but it looks more like furniture from the 1970s than it does from the 1930s because like when you lift a chair, it doesn't have the same heft that that kind of a chair would have had at the time. Um, Jennifer, do you want to say something about those beautiful mirrors?
Absolutely. So we are very fortunate to have quite a few absolutely stunning mirrors throughout the lobby level of Thompson-Markward Hall. And we have six of them. They're gold-plated mirrors that came out of the Kibbe mansion. And we've not had them dated, but from what we know about Bessie Kibbe, and she was raised by her grandparents, so we can presume that those mirrors are extraordinarily old. But so those are probably the only original items still left that I know of. We're always uncovering new things, so we'll find out what other hidden gems there might be as time goes on.
All right. I think we have our first hand raised from Suzanne. I'm going to unmute you, Suzanne, if I can.
Oops, can you?
Actually, I can't. Sorry. I think you have to, Jennifer.
Okay, give me a sec. Oh, there we go. Oh, and then, okay, so you're on mute now, but you should be able to unmute. Nope. Oh, no. I am sorry. It's not allowing me to unmute you. Perhaps you can type your question in. Thank you so much.
While you're typing your question, Suzanne, we had another question. Was it intentional for TMH to eventually be located on Capitol Hill, or did it just happen to end up there?
That's an excellent question, but I don't, uh, from what I know, and again, Jennifer will probably know more than I do. I don't think it was, I don't think it, in 1929, I don't think anybody was thinking about let's move back to Capitol Hill. I think it became one of many, many options under consideration at that time because the original housing was on Capitol Hill on in various locations, starting out over on East Capitol Street, which
Mhm.
oddly enough is where the Church of the Lutheran Reformation is today. Um, so there probably would have been some sort of historical basis for doing so. Um, this was a very prestigious area to be in. And interestingly enough, at that time, there were plans for East Capitol Street, and it's why the Folger Shakespeare Library is located where it is, to make that an arts and culture district straight on out to the Anacostia River. Um, so it wouldn't have been even inconceivable to think that they would have wanted to be part of that, but there's nothing that I have run across in the historical record that indicates that was the case. So I think it's more likely that because, and it's hard to tell if there were existing structures where the building sits today, or whether these were still empty lots of some kind, because even until the very late 1970s, the space behind Thompson-Markward Hall was basically like a no man's land. It was almost like a junkyard. So I don't know if there were properties here that they tore down. It doesn't indicate that. So I think it was probably a problem of just some really good, shrewd real estate wheeling and dealing on the part of the board to acquire some properties at a really good price in a killer location, would be my guess. And Jennifer, if you have any other thoughts to share.
I don't have any insight, unfortunately.
So yeah, I don't think we can really answer the question. But and at the time, you have to remember that the the Capitol grounds didn't extend to across the street. The Hart Senate office building was years off in the distance. So the building originally would have been facing other row houses across the street.
We have another question. So Suzanne wanted to know, is there a connection between YWCH and the office that houses suffragette movement on the corner, like the Belmont Paul Equality Center?
No, again, excellent question. That's amazing that somebody's even thinking of that. And wouldn't you think that would be natural? That maybe because that certainly predates the current Thompson-Markward Hall. That house was donated by Elva or purchased by Elva Belmont probably in the teens or even maybe a little bit earlier than that, maybe in 1910 or something like that. And it was a historic house, but it's called Belmont Sewell House because it was purchased by Elva Belmont to house the National Women's Party. But to my knowledge, I mean, certainly they would have been aware when they purchased these lots that was across the street. And might that have been intentional? I think we could surmise that maybe played some role in it, but we wouldn't be able to know that as a fact.
There's a question here from Jennifer. In our time going back through all of our records, have we been able to uncover any information about ethnic or religious integration of TMH?
Good question.
That is
There's
a really
nothing
good
that
question.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that you find in the record that would even bring up those as subjects. There would be nothing in the record addressing something like that. So I don't know if I get a little more clarity on the question, maybe I could answer it better.
So absolutely.
Hey, Jennifer, yeah, I can unmute you if you want to discuss more. I just have to find you on here.
And I want to point out, so Patricia sent this gorgeous picture of her mother from the 1950s out in front of TMH.
Love it.
Thank you for sharing that. We would love to use that. And your mom shared with you that we had a sewing room with sewing machines, and I'm so intrigued. I would love to know which room that was. I have suspicions, but I don't quite know. But I love this. I'm so sorry for your mom's recent passing, but we would love to chat with you further and learn more about her time here. But I love this picture. I
That's
absolutely love
wonderful. And
this.
yes, it would be so nice to be able to memorialize more of these stories and be able to share them, especially at this time.
So absolutely.
Hi,
Okay.
hi, this is Jennifer. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi,
So my,
Jennifer.
so my question about integration, and I'll back up and say I'm a Library of Congress librarian and lived at TMH when I first moved to the Hill, but I've done a lot of research on integration of Capitol Hill buildings. Of course, DC was a southern city. Everything was very segregated. There were segregated bathrooms, non-whites weren't allowed in, most of the dining facilities and things like that. But I do know how hard it is to find any of that written down because it was all kind of de facto segregation. If you look at old maps of the Capitol, no one has indicated that this is a black bathroom and this is a white bathroom. But I would assume as a southern city that TMH only let white young women lived there until a certain point. And I'm also curious, since it was the Young Women's Christian Home, if they ever actively, also barred Jews or anything like that. But it sounds like from the records, you can't tell.
No, nothing. I mean, it's interesting you're talking about sort of religions. Back in I do remember reading a passage. It would have been right after the Second World War. There was a woman that had come from, I think, present-day Bangladesh, and they were clearly addressing the fact that, I mean, they were welcoming her as opposed, and it was clear that she was not, quote, Christian. So
Interesting.
I do know, yeah, I do know that even though it was technically the Young Women's Christian Home, any references I've ever seen always seem to be interdenominational and that meant non-Christian. But that would be me sort of interpreting that it's not actually in the record. But yeah, interestingly and wonderfully, there never seemed to be barriers like that. I'm not saying they weren't present but it it doesn't seem like that was an issue. It always seemed to be about more like, particularly like when this building opened up, you paid according to your need. There wasn't like some fixed amount. And you can imagine the need in 1931. I would imagine that most everyone was paying virtually nothing at the time when the residence opened up. So it was more about need, being a young female and need than other criteria. And there, oddly enough, there doesn't even seem to be a big emphasis on like Christian services and things like that. In some of the photos, you will clearly see a clergy member, but there isn't a lot of discussion about religion, race, or ethnicity, that kind of thing, as being a barrier to entry. But that doesn't mean there weren't.
And I'd like to add on to that. So there is still some of the history that we still have to go through. We've seen there are allusions to, and I want to say it was the 20s. It was during the suffrage movement. The board actively refused to engage because it was a controversial topic. So they refused to allow speakers on that topic. So I'm not a historian, but I will say that there are still materials we've not gone through. I would be surprised if anything was written down, but it will be interesting to see what we uncover and how it aligns with our history. Oh, Amy. So you and Suzanne met here 30 years ago. That's amazing. So I love reading all the comments. So thank you. Thank you all for chiming in. Jennifer, just to go back to your question, we would love to know more. I mean, I think there's so much history for us to learn, and we've seen that a lot of it is very, at least some of our history, what we see are very kind of day-to-day practicalities of how much money did we pay for flour for the week or coffee for the week, and when did we get new curtains in these rooms and whatnot. So it's fun to go through the materials, and it'll be interesting to see what else we find.
Yes. Thank you.
Is this a question we have to address?
Oh,
yeah, so we kind of talked about here in the chat as well, but we're wanting to know if we keep photo albums of the residents through the years or any records of stays from that time. And I think we've kind of discussed this. We were virtually 100% on paper until 2016. So very difficult to find photos and records of people having stayed here, but we're going through that right now. And
that would be a wonderful archive if people know and have images to send that in to start building that record of people who lived here.
All right. Could we share more about how Eleanor Roosevelt's role, her role in TMH? It was neat to see the photo of her ribbon cutting.
Yes, so she was here on 2 occasions, but there's nothing I've uncovered that indicated she played an active role with the organization. So she was invited to attend the dedication ceremony, I believe.
Mhm.
No, or was okay, but that was in
Yes, the
19.
ribbon. She attended the ribbon cutting for the opening of the convalescent wing, the south wing. That was the add-on that was built thanks to Flora Markward Thompson's estate gift.
Yes, and there's nothing that in the record shows that she was like actively engaged with the organization. Mrs. Hoover was more actively engaged than Mrs. Roosevelt.
Loretta. Okay, Reagan, were you able to unmute Loretta?
Oh, let me. Yes, Loretta, you should be able to speak now. I think you're muted, but you should be able to unmute.
Oh, thank you. I just unmuted myself. For some reason, my comments weren't coming through. I'm not a very experienced Teams user. But I had one question and one suggestion. The question was whether or not the carriage house was built as part of the same time as the original structure. And then secondly, in terms of other groups that might be potential supporters to the fund for the renovation. There was a period of time of which I was part of where both male and female congressional pages lived at Thompson-Markward Hall. It was a fun time for all. And there's a very active alumni group. And I think that this would be a great presentation for them. So if you're ever interested, I'd be happy to make that connection.
Yes, please. Jump right into that. Yes, please. We would love to speak more. I had the pleasure to get to know some of the leadership from back in those days, and they came back for a reunion in
Yes, I was there.
23. Yes.
Yes.
And yes, so we would love to continue those conversations. That was so much fun to do that. And I can jump on to the attempt to respond to the carriage house question. And I so I'm not certain if it was part of the original structure. It is a part of the original blueprints that we have from Porter and Lockey that show the entire building. Both the north wing, the south wing, and the carriage house is presented on there. I am not able to translate enough of some of that. The original blueprints are very faded, but so I'm not able to find out. But that's certainly something that we'll investigate with our architects, because we would like to know as much as possible about every structure in the building and how it came to be and what its original use was. So, but yeah. So I know we need to wrap up. Do we have any other questions? We could probably, let's see. So Suzanne, yes, it would be interesting to know how many residents were able to find full-time professional employment from the women they met in the house. We really only know kind of anecdotally how things happen, but we're hoping over time to collect stories, more and more stories from our alumni, and try and get a better sense of what other stories and what else has happened amongst our community. And we're working on building that community. So a big part of Reagan's role is to reconnect with our alumni, which we have not done as much over the decades as we would like to have. And so we're trying to change that. And today's event is just one of those ways that we're trying to engage our alumni. We love hearing the stories. We love seeing the pictures. Um, you know, we have so much fun with that, and we're really excited to expand our efforts there. And honestly, I'm feeling like it would be fun just if we could all meet together for tea and hear your stories about Jennifer meeting your husband and Patricia hearing more about your mom and Amy and Suzanne what you got up to. So anyway, that's my dream. So it's 2:57. I think we've got and what time for one more quick question. And I'm not seeing anything, so which is quite all right. We will absolutely be hosting additional alumni events throughout the year. So stay tuned, watch your email, watch social media. If you know, for those of you who are local, and even if you're not, please, please, please come by anytime for a tour, to stop by, see us, visit us. We'll be happy to meet with you and hear more about your time at TMH. And um, we have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to say a huge thank you to all of you for joining us this afternoon. Thank Jim and Reagan for putting all of this together. They really worked very hard putting all of this together. Jim and I have had a lot of fun digging into the archives. There's still a lot more to read through, but we really enjoy learning more about this amazing organization. And I really can't thank all of you enough for I guess indulging us, because we could do this all day long, honestly. So. But as I said at the beginning, this has been recorded, so we will distribute the recording. I'm not sure offhand. I think we were looking at posting it, finding a way to post it online. So we'll definitely take care of that. But thank you so much for the nice words, everyone, and happy National Women's Month. And we look forward to future events with all of you. So thank you so much.